It's go time.
Toronto's Chad Kelly and Calgary's Logan Bonner combined for 9 interceptions last weekend, which is more concerning. For the third year in a row, the Saskatchewan Roughriders have gone winless for at least 7 consecutive games. What needs to change? The National Football League's new dynamic kickoff, is it much ado about very little change? Welcome to Third Down Gamble, with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham.
Despite early appearances, Nathan Rourke has certainly now started to show what he did the last time he was in the CFL. And Heath, your thoughts on that emergence coming so quickly without a training camp in the Canadian Football League? Rourke is starting to light it up.
He's about where I expected him to be. We know the first game was pretty ugly. The second game was a bit better. And then he's, over the last 2 games, really amped things up. I think a lot of people were confident that he was going to be a good to very good CFL quarterback. There was some pretty high expectations that he was going to come in and just pick up completely where he left off in 2022, which was an unrealistic expectation. But we're seeing the kind of Nathan Rourke that we expected. Good with his arm, great with his feet. One thing of concern right now, he's got 4 touchdown passes to 7 interceptions. That's something that he and the team need to clean up. I know a couple of the 3 interceptions he threw this last week were on deflected balls as well, so you can't pin every stat in the interception column on a quarterback, but something that they do need to get better at.
Yes, he did put a little bit of mustard on the football, and especially that one route that came across the middle where Justin McInnes had it just go right through his hands. That was a tough one. Again, that comes with familiarity and learning too, as I'll point to the game in the NFL last night with Aaron Rodgers. His ability to, when he throws it over the middle, to get it lower. Make sure that you don't put it high because you're exposing the receiver every time those arms go up to catch a football if you're the receiver. And you don't want that. You want them to be low and protected. He's got to get that ball down when you throw it over the middle. That's the way to do it. Unless it's a deeper route. Then you can go higher because there's not so much congestion. The linebackers are behind you. Maybe there's a DB and a halfback.
For sure. And Rourke's put up a couple 300-yard games passing now already in his return. This is, I think, one of the biggest benefits is the fact that he has signed a longer-term contract with the BC Lions as well. So you're going to get to see a lot of Nathan Rourke over the next couple of years, which is fantastic for the Lions, great for the league. And even if he keeps the caliber of what we saw over these last couple of games, he's going to be an all-CFL quarterback for years to come.
He could be a franchise quarterback. Again, we're basing a lot of this on what he did in 2022, but he seems to be finding that form again. There was so much pressure on him to get that form right away. He's now worked his way back into it. It looks to me like the BC Lions, with him playing this well, will be a force again. Alexander Hollins now is back in the mix as a receiver. That was huge because he had put up some big numbers early with Vernon Adams Jr. Now he's being found again by Nathan Rourke. It just looks to me, the way the Lions are coming together, that this offense has found what it had in the first 3 to 4 weeks of the season under Vernon Adams Jr.
It is, and they're doing a good job of spreading the ball around. We did see early in the season, it was basically Hollins and McInnes and really nobody else on that receiving core. They hit everybody for multiple targets with the exception of David Mackey this past week. Leading receiver was 78 yards for Hollins. Rourke put up over 300 in total. So that means he's seeing the field well. He's finding the open guy, and it's not just keying on one guy that you hope is open on every single play.
And the other part of this equation, he did it against the best defense in the CFL. The Alouettes looked ordinary with the BC Lions attack. And when you get 2 third down gambles that go for touchdowns against you, where it's not a 1-yard plunge, but David Mackey goes off the right side, Nathan Rourke goes off the left side, and these scampers of 18 to 20 some yards are huge, and they're backbreakers. And the Alouettes really didn't have an answer for that, and that was an onslaught right from the beginning. The BC Lions put the pedal to the metal and put it to that Alouettes defense.
They did, and as much as I hate the short yardage plunge plays, it's kind of fun to see a couple of them bust out for big gains. The one note that was really impressive about Nathan Rourke's touchdown run was the patience he showed as well. He did essentially run forward looking for a hole in the line. It wasn't there, and then he bounced it outside to the left and was gone. So it's fantastic to see some of that creativity back and a little bit more action, as opposed to the give it to the quarterback and let him fall forward and hope you got enough for the first down.
The Lions have served notice that they're going to take on all challengers. This is going to be a fascinating race to the finish between them, the Blue Bombers, and maybe the Elks. We'll see how that all plays out. Let's go talk about the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. In that Banjo Bowl rematch, Miles Brown makes the headlines again for a hit on the quarterback. This time it's on Chris Streveler. Now, let's sort of paint this picture for you. Chris Streveler is behind center on 2nd and short. Instead of handing the ball off or sneaking it, he's backpedaling, and they're trying to catch the Roughriders sort of napping, as it were, with Kenny Lawler running down the field. He's looking to hit him. Miles Brown comes through the middle, likely expecting Streveler to be there. He's not. He pushes forward, finds Streveler a couple yards back, gets him, and with his helmet just above his knees, but the rest of the force of his body below the knees, gets Streveler wrapped up and slams him down. Streveler put it up on his Twitter account that 3 of the 4 ligaments on his left knee were torn from that hit. And for the second week in a row, Miles Brown is hit with a roughing the passer penalty. Thoughts on that?
Well, let's back up a little bit more. This is his 3rd roughing the passer penalty this season that has resulted in an injury to a quarterback. We had the one against the Ottawa Redblacks, Drew Brown, as well, where he rolled a bit uncontrolled into the legs of Drew Brown. 1 roughing the passer penalty resulting in an injury is unlucky. 2 is a coincidence. 3, I think, is showing a bit of a pattern. I don't think this was a malicious, dirty play. It was a matter of the defensive lineman fighting through the offensive line and getting the quarterback. I fully support the fact that he was fined for his hit on Zach Collaros in the Labor Day game. I think that was warranted. Roughing the passer was the right call on this play. I don't foresee the necessity for supplemental discipline being a fine or suspension on this one. I think it's time to serve notice to Miles Brown as well that as much as he wants to play to the whistle, he needs to be a bit more aware of his surroundings and what the outcomes of the play are.
Article 5, roughing the passer, clearly states delivering a blow at or below the knees of the passer, regardless if the defender's path to the passer was unrestricted or if they're coming off a blocker. In other words, you don't have the excuse that, well, I was being blocked and I slipped or whatever the case is. This is where maybe in the Drew Brown incident where he came around the edge, he actually was flipped by Ottawa offensive lineman Darius Bladdock. But in that case, you could probably cut him a pass a bit. But then the question becomes, why are you rushing so hard when you could probably see that someone's on the ground? You may trip over them. You should slow up a little bit. And that's what the CFL is trying to end this gray area and say, look, you get them, you get fined. You get them, you could get ejected.
Yeah, I fully expect this to be a hot topic for the CFL this offseason in further protecting the quarterback. And I believe I talked about it in last week's episode as well, about a bit more black and white of this is the result of this play. And like I said, I do 100% think a roughing the passer flag was appropriate in this one. And I just don't see enough of it to be anything beyond that, unless you start taking the 2 prior incidents into consideration as well. And now, as I said, this is the 3rd quarterback he's knocked out of a game due to injury on a rough play. That stuff needs to start adding up at some point as well.
You could look at the past even between the Roughriders and the Blue Bombers. It's not the first time, going back a week earlier, where Zach Collaros has been subject to a headshot by a member of the defensive line of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Now, Brown, a little bit different scenario. While the play was still being enacted, he did it. It was deliberate. There's no question. Previous year, Pete Robertson, this was after the play was over, turned around and gave a headbutt to Zach Collaros while he was standing there. That was unconscionable. Of course, we could always go back to what happened to Jeremiah Mazzoli with Garrett Marino. There's that pattern going on with the Roughriders. Now, you can't blame necessarily this coach because he wasn't there for the other two. When you have this type of play happening under your tutelage, Corey Mace said Miles Brown isn't a dirty player. Even John Hodge from 3 Down Nation went to the Blue Bombers in their locker room and asked, is he? And they said, no, he's not. That's not his style. You can't defy the evidence that's being thrust upon you. And as you say, 1, 2, 3, now what?
I think another note with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, under Craig Dickinson, discipline was an issue for the Riders over the last couple of seasons. Corey Mace came in talking about playing more disciplined football, and we're not seeing that result on the field right now. That could be partially because of the long losing streak and some frustration starting to boil over, but if he came into Regina saying he was going to clean that up, I would give him a failing grade on that at this point.
It's something that he did address to the media after the first incident. On the second one, he's probably going to have to work on it at practice much more, and this is one thing that they do have in front of them is a bye, so they can produce maybe some better results. I think you're absolutely right. So far, it hasn't worked. And if it's not working, you have to go into the coach's room and ask yourself, what is going wrong here? Why are we not getting our message across? If that's not what we want, then what are we not doing? This then brings the question, ultimately, is there something with this locker room that promotes this? Not everybody was there when Garrett Marino was there, but still there are some attitudes maybe that are lingering. I don't know. It's a wild guess on my part, but it does make you wonder how one team consistently is falling into this pattern. For the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, let's talk about Chris Streveler. At this point in time, as we discussed, he is done for the year. What do the Blue Bombers do? Where do you go to find somebody to fill in his role specifically?
As far as the injury, the Bombers are on a bye week this week as well, so they won't return to practice until the following week. There are some names out there if you're looking to shore up short yardage. Realistically, as much as Chris Streveler was listed as the number 2 guy, we've seen he's essentially the short yardage specialist. Taylor Cornelius, Jake Dolagala, Mason Fine, Terrell Pigram are all free agents right now that have some CFL experience. Pigram very much more limited than the other 3. Of those, I would potentially look at Dolagala. He's the one that did have some game time this season. If you wanted somebody to come in and run the short yardage offense. The Bombers made a very gutsy call late in the fourth quarter as well, going for it on 3rd and short with about 2 minutes and 44 seconds left, running Terry Wilson on the short yardage play, and he got 4 yards when only 1 was needed. That was a great play because clock management was a big part of protecting that lead late in the game, and it allowed them to run another minute off the clock before Sergio Castillo kicked a field goal. I don't know that the Bombers want to go with Terry Wilson as their short yardage guy. I think they have a lot more belief in him being the next quarterback of note in throwing the ball and that sort of thing. So I think they are going to go out and go after somebody. There's 4 names I threw out there. They could be any one of those or maybe somebody else coming into the league.
Another idea were Ante Litre or David Mackey, that sort of thing where you bring an actual running back in to do those types of plunges, as it were. And the Bombers have Johnny Augustine, they have Brady Oliveira, they've probably got somebody else that they could use in that situation and not necessarily subject a quarterback to this. It's one of the weird trends that I find in the CFL where we've got the 3rd string quarterback as basically a glorified 1-yard plunge specialist. What is the point of calling him a quarterback then?
My thought on it is the reason you use a quarterback in those situations is if there's a really bad snap and it ends up rolling 4 or 5 yards back, you've got a guy that's capable of picking the ball up and finding somebody downfield to get a first down. We don't see it happen. I guess in the back of the coach's mind, that's what they're preparing for. We did see Winnipeg do a direct snap to Brady Oliveira in the Banjo Bowl as well. It's not something that would be completely foreign to them. And it's going to be a an interesting couple of weeks to see what happens with that roster.
CFL used to be dotted with amazing running backs: George Dixon, George Reed, Mike Pringle, Chris Sarka, Charles Roberts, who was celebrated at halftime and got his name on the wall at Princess Auto Stadium. That's what they lived to do. They were going to get that short yardage for you, and they were good at doing it. We've gotten away from it, or we've seen the teams get away from it. I'm not sure why, but I kind of put it back to Wally Bono. He was kind of the first one that pushed this idea forward and started to use it, and as other teams saw it, they thought, well, we'll give it a try and see what happens. Clearly, it's got a hold on the philosophies right, and the logic is distance. Take the snap behind center. What have you got in front of you? I always argue that, don't forget, there's two masses of bodies colliding. We see it all the time where a quarterback goes right up the backside of his offensive lineman because they've got nowhere to go. The defensive lineman is right there.
And even those short yardage running backs that you named, or players that were put in those short yardage situations, have very different styles. You want to talk about differences? Look at Chris Zarka versus Charles Roberts. Zarka's a guy that's going to hit that pile and find an opening and plunge for 2 or 3 yards. I watched a lot of highlights of Charles Roberts in the last couple of weeks when they announced he was going to be inducted into the Ring of Honor. He's a guy that was lining up 5-7 yards back, got the ball, and would leap over the line very successfully as well. So a lot of different style, and now you're just seeing that give it to the quarterback, push him up the middle. He's picking the A gap or the B gap pretty much every time, and the middle linebackers guessing which one he's diving into to try to stop him. It's not entertaining football necessarily, but the percentages are showing that it's still pretty effective.
Relatively speaking, yes, you probably are looking at about a 7.5 to 8 times out of 10 success rate. And this is one of the things that I've always sort of been confused by. They want more offense. Every league does, the NFL, the CFL. And yet this is the way you do it? I don't think that's really what gets people up and excited. What happens better, if you want excitement, get a 25-yard, a 50-yard something. Kick return, pass reception, run for a touchdown. That gets people on their feet way more because there's a build-up to it where you've got this situation where they're at the one. Everybody in the house knows what you're doing.
Looking at some other quarterback stats of the past week, Chad Kelly and Logan Bonner combined for 9 interceptions in their losses to Ottawa and Edmonton, respectively. What did you see out of those two quarterbacks, and what's the biggest concern for the Argonauts and the Stampeders?
For the Toronto Argonauts, I think the biggest concern is that Chad Kelly looked like he took a massive step backward in that first half. As the Argonauts tried to get back into the game, he did settle down and got the ball to his receivers. They scored a couple touchdowns. The 41-27 score, if you take away the 2 interceptions that went for pick sixes, then the Argonauts are right in that game. You give up pick sixes against an offense that has been struggling, and you are in trouble. And for Damon Webb, let's give him credit, especially on that second one, where he had to bounce the ball off his knee to try to find the reception and then took off around the edge and went down the field. It's only, I think, the 8th or 9th time in CFL history that somebody's gone twice on a pick six. For Chad Kelly, you could tell that his moxie was shattered. And I think that's the biggest problem that he has. And maybe you disagree, but I think there's the swagger that he had going into the East Final last year is gone.
It is, and there's a lot of contributing factors to that. There's a 9-game suspension. There's a lot of investigation into his off-field behavior. It was a brutal game against the Montreal Alouettes in that East Final. He's now just getting a few starts back under him, and to have this kind of disaster of a game has to set him back mentally. It was a great game, as you mentioned, by Damon Webb. A couple of very athletic plays. Once things started to go wrong, it really took Chad Kelly a long time to shake that off. There was some production there in the second half, but too little too late in a game that the Red Blacks dominated from the start.
The Argonauts put up 463 yards of offense in that football game. That doesn't necessarily dictate to me that the offense is overall struggling, but if you're going to be in football games, you've got to make the first quarter count. And this is where they have fallen down. Against the Tiger Cats, they went down early and had to come back. Against the Red Blacks, the exact same thing. Chad Kelly has got to get that offense moving faster. Get on the same page with his receivers. And in each of those games, he threw an interception that's basically set the tone for the early part of the game. He still has, I think, all the tools and the skill set. Right now it's between the ears. It's just the belief system. He's got to start trusting what he knows he can do. Let's go to Logan Bonner. What a baptism by fire. What a difficult situation. You're in the middle of a back-to-back. You've got a head coach that's scrambling to try to figure out what he can do to get something changed for your football team. You get tossed in there. You throw all those picks, and it just hamstrung the Stampeders. I don't necessarily blame Logan Bonner, although when you're giving up interceptions in the opposing team's end zone or within 10 yards of that end zone, that's huge. You can't be doing that. That's so debilitating. He probably will learn a lot from that. I imagine he's going to get the start against the Alouettes, but the Stampeders right now, they're spiraling.
They are, and I don't blame Dave Dickinson for looking for a change. We know Jake Mayer, we've discussed at length, he's a quarterback that doesn't blow anybody away, but he's durable and it shows up for games. Logan Bonner was going to give the Stampeders a bit of a different look. It did not go well, but with a first career start for somebody, sometimes it goes great, sometimes it goes really bad. I don't think this is an indication of the quality of player that Logan Bonner is or can be. If he continues to get starts, the next 2 or 3 starts are going to be very telling in whether he has settled down and learned from these mistakes or if it continues to get in his head. 21 of 36 for 284 yards doesn't look too bad for a debut of a quarterback until you add the 5 TDs and 0 interceptions. Once you start looking further down the line, it gets ugly.
You're precisely right. And again, it's where those interceptions happened. Even on the flip side, McLeod Bethel Thompson didn't have the greatest of games. 15 completions on 25 attempts for 219. A big interception at the end of the game. Mike Rose goes all the way for the touchdown for the Stampeders. But in that, as Bethel Thompson is chasing him down, he seems to pull something. And it seemed to be either in his abductor or somewhere in the abdominal area. Now we're hearing that Trey Ford is going to be getting the start against the Blue Bombers when the Elks next take the field.
A bit of a surprise given that there's a bye week in the mix here as well, that Jarius Jackson would come out and anoint Trey Ford as the starter of the next game. I guess you look at the history of the Elks this year, and once the coaching change took effect and they got Trey Ford into the games, those wins started to come. I'm hoping that the reasoning behind this is that Jarius Jackson wants to see Trey Ford back as the leader. He sees him as the number one guy. Now, they did throw a lot of money at Bethel Thompson in the offseason to bring him in, so there's a bit of a balancing act there. Bottom line is the Elks have played themselves back into playoff contention in the last month, and they need to focus on wins. They got a very tough test coming up with a home and home against the also streaking Winnipeg Blue Bombers. If you look at the hottest 2 teams in the league over the last 6 weeks, it's probably Edmonton and Winnipeg. So those are going to be big games with a lot on the line. They're trying to track down Saskatchewan for that 3rd spot. It'll be really fun to watch what Trey Ford brings.
I don't disagree with what Jarius Jackson did, naming him the starter. He was held back because of a rib injury. And the way that Jarius Jackson is approaching this, he's basically saying that Trey Ford is our starting quarterback from here on out. And let's look at the situation. The Bombers have a dynamic defensive line. They're going to push the quarterback. McLeod Bethel Thompson rarely scares anybody with his scrambling ability, but Trey Ford does. And I'm sure that Jarius Jackson is fully aware of that. Granted, he's let the cat out of the bag and told the Blue Bombers who to prepare for, but what difference does it make? You're going to probably see him anyway. The Blue Bombers were half expecting it. I look at this situation as Jarius Jackson making sure that he knows what he's got going into that football game. Those are massive games. And if the Elks want to be a contender, I think it's going to be on the shoulders of Trey Ford to carry them there.
As I said, these are going to be a couple of really important matchups coming up after the bye for both of these teams. And you've got a Blue Bombers defense that has really rushed 3 and dropped 8 or 9 over the last couple of games. If you bring Trey Ford into the mix, how does that change Winnipeg's defensive plan? They know that Trey Ford has proven himself as a runner. They have to figure out a way to contain him, but still have that secondary and that coverage team shutting down the receiver option. So I think it's going to be a bit of a change for Jordan Younger and that Bombers defense in how they prepare for this one. And those in-game adjustments are going to be very telling.
The Blue Bombers cannot run with a 3-man front against the Elks if Trey Ford is there, because he is just going to take the edge and he's going to be gone. And Willie Jefferson is going to be chasing from behind, not getting to the quarterback from in front. This is a really telling game, and I'm really looking forward to it. Unfortunately, at least the first of the doubleheader, I'm going to be in Edmonton to watch it live. I'm really looking forward to this. It's a doubleheader weekend for my wife and I as we go first Saskatchewan to Calgary when they get back on the field on the Friday night. Then we scoot up to Edmonton 2.5 hours to watch the Elks and the Blue Bombers. I'm really looking forward to this. And I've seen Trey Ford live once, and he took care of the Roughriders that night. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm happy that the Elks are making moves. I'm especially happy that they drew 30,000 to the game on the weekend. That is great for that franchise.
It is. One key player to watch for the Bombers in this game against the Elks, in my mind, would be Tony Jones, relief linebacker. He seems to be very athletic, getting involved in plays. We saw him knock down some key passes, that 2-point convert effort in Regina for the Labor Day game. He's a guy that I can see the Bombers keying on Trey Ford to try to slow him down. I think he's got some speed. You compare him to Adam Bighill in the middle. Tony Jones could run circles around Adam Bighill. As much as Bighill's smart and physical, you need somebody athletic with a lot of speed, and that's where Tony Jones is going to come into play.
The biggest thing with Bighill out, and I still haven't heard definitively if it was because of the cut block, which I wish they would ban, or the fact that he had leapt to get over the cut block, and that's what had caused the injury in Regina. He's a quarterback on defense for the Blue Bombers. He is one of the most intelligent players that you can ever have on defense. He'll make a great coach someday. I hope it's not soon. I hope for the Bombers' sake it isn't soon either. The one thing that I've just been stunned by, and we talked about at the beginning of the season, the Bombers' offense was going to be fine. What was their defense going to be like? And it's been the exact flip side. Nathan Rourke has thrown in 4 games twice for 300 yards plus. Zach Collaros in 11 games has thrown twice for 300 yards plus.
It is a staggering stat, but I think what's most important for Winnipeg over these last few games is he's cut down on the mistakes. The interceptions, although he's still leading the league, those are coming down. The turnovers, the fumbles, all of that sort of thing. They got themselves into a very deep hole in that 0-4 start in the turnover battle this season, and they're slowly creeping back up to getting it to even. They were, I think, at one point about a -10 or -12 in the turnover ratio. So as those mistakes come down, you're not relying on Zach Collaros to light things up. He is managing it well, protecting the football, and making smarter decisions.
In this situation, you mentioned it quickly, that the Blue Bombers started the season at 0-4. The Elks started the season at 0-7. The Elks are now half a win or 1 point behind the Saskatchewan Roughriders. The Blue Bombers hold down first place after that start. The Saskatchewan Roughriders have done something dubious in their recent run here. They are 0-6-1, one tie. The Roughriders, for the 3rd straight year, gone winless in 7 straight games. Only the Montreal Alouettes of the 1967-69 era did the same thing. What is up with this team that they disappear for months at a time?
Well, I think the scariest stat for the Roughriders is in the previous 2 seasons, they haven't won after Labor Day. And now we're post Labor Day. We saw them lose the back-to-back against Winnipeg. They need to turn this trend around. And what they have going for them right now is that their next start is against a struggling Calgary Stampeders team after a bye. So if they come out ill-prepared for that one, I don't know what to say about the hopes of this team for the rest of the season. That's a must-win game for them, but it's a winnable game, and that is going to be a real key indicator for what to expect for the rest of the season.
So much was tied up in the way Trevor Harris was going to lead this team, and yet he's been here for half of this losing streak and hasn't changed anything. Granted, he's put up some nice numbers, but against Toronto, he put up some really incredulous, head-scratching interceptions that almost looked like replays of each other in that football game. There are times when he's lights out, and there's times when you should turn the lights out. I don't know if the Roughriders, and I've argued this on this podcast incessantly, I don't know if you really tie your wagon to him anymore. He's not the future. You've got to start making some decisions about what is your future or who is your future and go with it.
And really scary for the Roughriders is in both of these games against Winnipeg, they had a chance late to win. They had the ball in the hands of Trevor Harris. In the home game, Labor Day Sunday, he threw a really ill-advised pass on the 2-point convert attempt. As the aforementioned Tony Jones knocked that one down. He also threw an interception that, fortunately for him, was waved off due to pass interference. Gave them a chance to go for a tying kick, or a winning kick, but it was out of Brett Lother's range. In this one, again, they're down by 5. They get the ball back. Time to string some plays together and hopefully find the end zone. What happens in this one? An ill-advised pass. Tyrell Ford gets his second interception of the game and seals it for the Blue Bombers. So that's late game situations where any quarterback is going to tell you they want the ball in their hands with a chance to win. He did not look great in either one of those situations.
Darren Flutie, a guest of the podcast, famously said, this would be about 20 years ago, when talking about a certain Roughriders quarterback at that time, that there are quarterbacks with whom you can win with, and there are quarterbacks with whom you can win because. If you look around the landscape right now in the because category, it's Nathan Rourke, it's Zach Collaros, it's maybe Cody Fajardo, and if he's hot, Bo Levi Mitchell. Win with Trevor Harris, maybe McLeod Bethel Thompson, Jake Mayer. These are guys that in a Collaros or Mitchell in his previous life with the Stampeders especially, you won because of that quarterback.
Exactly, and you look at Zach Collaros as a prime example of that. We talked about the game against the Hamilton Tiger Cats 3 weeks ago, where he struggled throughout the game. He got the ball back with a minute and a half left, took the Bombers down the field for the winning touchdown. That's what you expect to see from a quarterback that's going to lead you to victory. Frankly, we just haven't seen that from Trevor Harris.
Darren Flutie, who famously worked with Danny McManus, he was another type of leader. You need those guys. You need those guys that the buck stops with me, and I'm going to make sure that we get down the field and do what we need to do to win this football game. I don't see that in Trevor Harris.
I think if it were not for some fantastic catches by Sam Emelis, we're not even talking about these games being close. Emelis and Sean Bain have made some key plays on some not great thrown balls by Trevor Harris that have resulted in extending drives and getting them into contention. And you have to, yes, the quarterback has to get the ball there, but it's been some outstanding play by these receivers that have really given them a chance to even stay in some of these games.
Goes back to the original premise. The Roughriders for the third straight season have gone winless in 7 at some point in the season. The previous 2, it was Labor Day and through to the finish. This year it's partway through the season, but here we again at Labor Day, as you indicated. What is happening in that room? What is happening with the coaches that this isn't being corrected? You could say some breaks didn't go their way. Well, they got a gift break in Hamilton, if you remember, the second week of the season where Tim White slides to make a catch and bobbles the ball up in the air, and CJ Rivas intercepts it with about 15 seconds to go for the Roughriders to win that game on a field goal.
It's finding the ways to finish. You're exactly right. And we look at Edmonton early on this season, losing games back-to-back by walk-off field goals, losing 4 straight by 3 points. They flipped the switch. They turned it the other way and have figured out how to turn those close games into wins. That's what has been successful for Winnipeg as well. They haven't blown anybody out of the water this year. As much as you expected the offense to put up 30, 40 points a game. They've had some injury struggles on the offensive line and the receiving core, but they're finding ways to do it. They're getting those key points at the time of the game where it really changes the outcome. And Saskatchewan is struggling to do that right now. Maybe it is time to look at the quarterback change. I don't know how much longer Corey Mace is going to want to go with Trevor Harris in this situation. We'll see if it's Shea Patterson time in the next couple of weeks.
Last time the Roughriders won, Shea Patterson was their quarterback.
Hi, I'm Darren Flutie, and you're listening to the Third Down Gamble podcast.
The National Football League introduced their dynamic kickoff, and if you watched any of the games, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If all kicking players will line up with 1 foot on the receiving team's 40-yard line. The kicker cannot cross the 50-yard line until the ball touches the ground. The 10 kicking team players cannot move until the ball touches the ground or the receiving team touches the football. And the receiving line will be a 5-yard area from the 35 to the 30, where at least 9 receiving team players must line up. 7 of the players with a foot on the 35. Players not on the restraining line must be lined up in the setup zone outside the hash marks. All players in the setup zone cannot move until the kick has hit the ground or the player in the landing zone has made contact with the football, and a maximum of 2 returners. The landing zone, of course, is up to the 20-yard line.
That's a lot to try to keep an eye on as far as the officials too, right? Like, it's in baseball, you've got to watch one guy to see if he leaves before the fly ball is caught, if he's tagging up. But now you're watching 10 guys on a tag up rule. Like, that's a lot to keep an eye on.
If you don't hit the landing zone, like you come up short, then the ball is set up at the 40. Where if you do as you're supposed to, land it in the landing zone, put it through the end zone, it's 25 or 30. 25 if it goes on the field and then through the end zone, 30 if it goes right through into the end zone without contacting the field prior. It's a really convoluted system. I don't think it's doing what they want. I would be stunned that it wouldn't be either devolved, eradicated, or somehow amended to create more interest. Well, last year, 3 out of 4 kickoffs were touchbacks. This year, it's 2 out of 3. They haven't moved the needle very far.
They haven't moved it far, but they have moved it. I will give them credit for that. It's enough to make the return game a little bit more important. I think there's going to be some kickers and some teams that are just going to be of the philosophy of, well, launching it for a touchback is only a 5-yard disadvantage if it brings it out to the 30. Some teams are going to continue to go that way. I'm glad they're trying something to bring the return game back. What they're hoping to avoid is the real high-speed, high-impact collisions that are going to cause injury. That's why they've changed where the teams line up as well. You don't have cover teams running the full length of the field, getting up to full speed and flying into somebody. It does lessen that. I don't know what more they could do other than bring the kickoff even further back to eliminate those touchbacks from happening. I mean, we do see touchbacks in the CFL, and the field is longer. We saw Sergio Castillo launch one in Regina through the end zone for a key rouge, as it turned out. I love the fact that on both punts and kickoffs in the CFL, you get a lot more action. The NFL did have 1 return touchdown in the first week of games. They've got 1. It's a step in the right direction. You can't argue that CFL kickoffs aren't more exciting.
For the most part, kickers are thumping that ball through the end zone as they have been. If you're getting at a run rate of 1 out of 3 being returned, that's not a lot. What's your run rate in the CFL? It's probably 9.5 out of 10, where the ball is returned by Team B, the team that has a chance to receive the kickoff. To this point, it's still a fail. It looks oddballish, and the whole point of the kickoff, especially at the beginning of the game, is to get the crowd excited. The ball goes up in the air, the team receiving it gets it, and away we go. The game is on. Instead, The ball goes up in the air. The team looks at it, sees it sail through the end zone, and, okay, we'll just bring in the offense.
Now, call me crazy, but what if the NFL changed the rule where if it is a touchback, it costs the kicking team a single and the receiving team gets the ball at the 40?
Woohoo! Well, it wouldn't be the first time that they've looked up north to figure out how the rules should be. The other idea that I had about it, and this is something that the CFL did for this year, after field goals, you have the option, as the team being scored upon, you have the option to take the ball at the 40-yard line. I always find it weird that a field goal takes you to the 40 or a single takes you to the 40. I think the singles only maybe get you to the 25. If you give up a single, you shouldn't get so much reward for doing so. The whole idea then would be, if you want safety as your main guideline, well, cut down the number of kickoffs in a game. Don't have them necessarily after each field goal. Then you adopt what the CFL did. It'll be a little bit tougher in the NFL, but in the last 3 minutes of a game in the CFL, you cannot defer to taking the ball at the 40. You have to accept a kickoff, and that's to allow teams to get short kickoffs, i.e. what Saskatchewan did against Winnipeg in the Labor Day game, and give them that opportunity to come back. The NFL, I don't know what the timestamp would be. I don't think you want it at the 2-minute warning. Sometime before that, maybe 5.
Yeah, I think there's more to be done. I guess, as I said, that it has trended a little bit towards getting more returns. We'll see what happens for the rest of the season. I wouldn't be surprised if there's teams that have a kicker with a strong leg that just go, you know what, we're going to give up the extra 5 yards, boot that thing through the end zone. For the games where we do get to see a little bit more return, it certainly adds some excitement.
Again, it's just not enough to make me get out of my chair and go, yay.
Third down.
Game 1 of the week kicks off at BC Place Stadium, where the host BC Lions are 5.5-point favorites to the visiting Toronto Argonauts. Can Nathan Rourke and that offense cover this 5.5-point spread against a Toronto team that's kind of needing a win?
The Lions need the win as much as the Argos need the win, because they're in a dogfight with the Blue Bombers for first place, and getting home field advantage in that final game is massive. The Argos, of course, won a home playoff date in the East, and they're trying to catch up to the Ottawa Redblacks, having lost to them. That hurts. The Argos offense, as we indicated before with Chad Kelly at the helm, has got to start quickly. This is the only way that this aim is going to matter. I'm surprised at how much the Argonauts, especially the secondary, has been torched this year. Drew Brown had a field day, just going anywhere he wanted with the football. If Nathan Rourke stays healthy through the full game, plays like he did in Montreal, 5.5 I think is cheap. This is an easy pick for me. It's the Lions easily at home.
I'm going to take the Lions at home as well. The one thing for me, though, is the Lions secondary isn't really scary outside of CJ Lee and maybe Gary Peters if he's having a good game. So Chad Kelly needs a bounce back. I think he's going to come out throwing a lot in this one to try to reestablish that offense. We've seen Nathan Rourke trending the right way, though, and I believe that gives the Lions the edge for at least a touchdown victory in this one. I don't think it's going to be a complete dismantling of the Toronto Argonauts by any means. I would certainly take the Lions to cover the 5.5.
Kelly threw 56 times against the Ottawa Redblacks. There's not much room to throw anymore. Where the Argonauts have to get going is with Kadeem Carey in that running game. Keep the Lions defense off guard. I don't see how the Argonauts win this football game. They're struggling a little bit. Ryan Dinwiddie was throwing his headset trying to extol his team to show some energy on the sideline. They need something, but I don't think they're going to find it in Vancouver. Game 2, first of a twin bill on Saturday. Ironically, last Saturday was the only 3-game tripleheader that we have all year. Red Blacks are in Hamilton. The Red Blacks 4.5 favorites on the road. Your thoughts on that?
As much as we talk about the Montreal Alouettes running away with the East Division, if you look at the standings, with their loss and Ottawa's win, the Red Blacks are only 3 points behind Montreal for first place. The Red Blacks are trending in the right direction. Drew Brown has been a bright light for the Red Blacks on a team that has had some quarterback issues over the last couple of seasons. I like the Red Blacks on the road, plus the 4.5 in this one. I think Hamilton, although they've shown some light with a big win over the Argonauts on Labor Day, they are still a team that's trying to find their identity, and I think the Red Blacks come in and win this one outright, cover the 4.5 point spread.
The Tiger Cats are such feast and famine. They either have it or they don't on a given day. If they have it, then this is going to be a fantastic football game, because if they don't, then the Red Blacks are going to win in a rout. I'm hoping they have it. I'm going to take the Red Blacks to win, but the Tiger Cats to get close enough to beat the cover. Bo Levi Mitchell has finally shown me enough that he can be consistent enough with that offense to get them going. He's got some nice touch on his deep passes. They've got a decent running game working for them. And Chris Jones running that defense, they're much more dynamic, much more in tune with what they need to be doing out there. The Ticats are better than that record. How much better is what we need to find out.
Rounding out the week, McMahon Stadium sees the Calgary Stampeders host the league-leading Montreal Alouettes. Montreal's favored by 5.5 points. Logan Bonner, Jake Mayer, Tommy Stevens. Does it matter who's at the quarterback position for the Stampeders? Can they keep this one close?
Calgary has been better at home, other than the game that they played against Edmonton on Labor Day Monday. The Stampeders have been tight with everybody that they've faced. But the Alouettes are coming off an embarrassment at home, and that is going to fuel them. And the weird thing about the Alouettes, and this is a trend that's been happening the last 3 seasons, they have a better road record than they do a home record. And it's played out again this year, where the Alouettes are undefeated on the road. Unless Calgary and Logan Bonner, I imagine who's starting, find some, I don't know what you would call it, mystery juice. Find some way to figure out that Alouettes defense, because they love feasting on rookie quarterbacks.
Well, we know it's Cody Fajardo that's bringing the sprinkles to this game for the Montreal Alouettes, and I would suspect that the Alouettes bounce back from that loss against the BC Lions. I don't know if Logan Bonner is the answer for the Calgary Stampeders offense. If he gets the start in this one, he's going to need to be a lot better facing that Montreal Alouettes defense. I'm taking the Alouettes plus the 5.5 in this one. I wouldn't be surprised if we're well into double digits in the spread.
The Alouettes, you pointed out quite correctly, they're only a game and a half ahead of the Red Blacks. If Ottawa wins earlier in the afternoon, suddenly they're sniffing at their heels. And you don't think that the Alouettes are going to notice? Even if the Red Blacks lose, the Alouettes with a victory can really distance themselves and sort of lock up first place. Lots is on the line, and that's what we love about September onward in the league. Certain teams are going to be in the playoffs. Other teams are going to be in the fight for the playoffs. This is what makes it so exciting. I'm going to take with you the Alouettes to cover on the road in Calgary. The Stampeders, there's been some Twitter talk that they should fire Dave Dickinson from both positions and hire Craig Dickinson to replace him.
How are we feeling about that one, Roughrider fans? What are your thoughts on that coming to fruition? My big thing for the Calgary Stampeders is they've got a very lengthy record of being a playoff team. They scraped in last year with a 6-win season. They're in a dogfight right now with Edmonton having swept them, with Saskatchewan, who's come back to them a little bit as well. If the Stampeders have any inkling of thinking they deserve to be in the playoffs, they need to at least keep this one close and then start converting some wins. Otherwise, it's going to get away from them really quick.
They've lost the season series to the Elks. That means that they're going to have to be free and clear of them to finish ahead. The Stampeders are at the bottom looking up. Rarefied air for the Calgary Stampeders to be down there. They can do it. They can get out of this hole, but their problem, as it's been from day one of this season, is quarterback. Does Matthew Schultz figure into this equation at all? He's been injured from training camp.
He might be their best chance. I mean, he's another guy that has been a very capable backup in this league. He's never really been anointed a number one guy, but he's had ample playing time in Hamilton and Montreal over previous seasons. He is somebody that if Logan Bonner continues to struggle, I think you've got to give him a chance and see if he can at least stabilize things and give them a fighting chance of making it back into playoff contention.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble podcast. Audio worth watching.